So first of all, welcome everyone to today's threat briefing, where we are going to discuss the Salesloft breach and the rising tide of SaaS attacks. Joining me today, first we have Aviv Sinai. Aviv is head of innovation here at Grip Security, big wave. We have Salar Fatoorehchi, channel director here at Grip Security, and my name is Chad Holmes. I will be the moderator for today's webinar, or threat briefing as we're calling it. Today, we're going to talk about a couple really specific details of the Salesloft attack, and then we're going to get more specifically into what people can do to protect themselves from this breach, as well as the rising tides of breaches we're seeing. So we'll talk at a high level about what this breach was, the timeline, the cascading impact that hit multiple different environments, over 700 at this point, and how this is part of the increasing attack focus. At a high level, there are some key points that you need to know. One is a chatbot called Salesloft Drift was breached. That chatbot was widely used to integrate with Salesforce instances, leading to the exposure of Salesforce data. The nature of this attack led to a cascading impact that originally hit a couple companies, then a few hundred, now 700 and likely thousands of companies. This is also one of many focus attacks that we've seen over the last 18 months or so on SaaS environments. So this is not one attack standalone. This is the evolution of attacks we've been seeing as attackers are going after data-rich environments, mostly for profit. They're able to sell that data online. Fortunately, though, there are 7 clear remediation steps that we're seeing amongst our customers, amongst our partners that are helping with this. And we can help as well as our partners. And that's the main point we want to drive home today is we have the understanding, we're going to share it with you, and we can help wherever you need it. So with that summary out of the way, Aviv, let's start with a little bit of the timeline of the Salesloft breach, at least so far. Can you talk to me about the origins? Because they weren't just a week or two ago like many people think. This actually goes back in time.
Yeah, so it was actually updated only a few days ago by Salesloft on what actually happened in the initial attack. So this is how the threat actor gained access to Salesloft Drift. They compromised the GitHub user, a user that belongs to Salesloft, and that user was able to perform many actions such as adding new users, creating workflows, and also just exfiltrate the entire code base that they have, which gave them access to AWS, to Salesloft infrastructure, which from there they were able to get the OAuth tokens from the SaaS-to-SaaS Drift Drift connections and be able to see and gain access to both Salesforce, to clients Salesforce and Drift email instances. This is just
sorry to cut you off. There's 2 really interesting points there that you made. One is that there was a single layer of trust with that GitHub instance, and once that trust was gone, it opened the floodgates, right? The second was, I want you to talk a little bit more about how people were covering their tracks, how UNC6395 was trying to cover their tracks and where they succeeded and kind of where they failed, which led to the identification.
Yeah, so we did see a lot of operations where they were able to cover their tracks. We did see that they didn't cover their tracks when accessing clients' Salesforce objects. Meaning that they performed queries, they were trying to retrieve users, retrieve tokens, retrieve data from Salesforce, but they didn't delete the logs. They had the ability to do that, but they did not. And this is one of the red flags that went up, and was that Mandiant and many other companies were able to see that there was an anomaly here, and that there was a lot of different types of queries and data that was being queried for.
Yeah, so even though they had the brilliance of the attack, the evil brilliance, they missed one critical step, which gave everyone the insight they needed to recover from this. So infiltration happened over the course of, what is that, 5 months or so? And then once they decided to actually pull the trigger on the attack, everything happened really quick. So can you talk about the fallout from the attack?
Yeah, so the fallout, it's still going on. It started from just a few companies, Cloudflare, Zscaler, saying like, hey, we're a part of this. but a lot was in the dark. Until we continued to learn that this is a much bigger issue. There's currently an assumption of over 700 companies that are affected by this. The impact type varies, so it can be just customer data or customer information of contact, but it can also be secrets and more personal information. Um, so the companies now that are affected, they firstly need to go through a disclosure, which sometimes takes time, a long time, but sometimes not. Um, but also, there's still a lot of companies that are in the dark. And this is an issue because most companies don't know if their vendors that they're using are breached or not. So the fault is still happening. The attacker was able to get access to customers' AWS secrets, Snowflake, other types of infrastructure that were able to actually breach that customer and creating a cascading effect.
Yeah, and I wouldn't want to be a Snowflake security employee over the last year or so. That's not a fun job. I think the greatest irony of all this is that Salesforce and Salesloft, they've actually recovered at this point, right? It's back up and running, but it's the cascading impact that we're seeing where there's hundreds of others now that are trying to recover. So Aviv, can you talk about the recovery on the technical side? And then Salar, after that, I want to ask you what you're seeing customers and our partners do to help people recover. But Aviv, let's start with the tech side.
Yeah, most definitely. So yes, after it was alerted and disclosed, Mandiant and also Google and Salesloft were able to revoke tokens to make sure that there's no ongoing efforts to breach, but the impact was already done. So what the main behavior we see the attacker doing is trying to harvest credentials. It was using the Salesforce objects, the Gmail objects, to be able to extract credentials, and therefore the attacker was able to get access to other infrastructures. If it was AWS, Snowflake, as I mentioned before, but it doesn't stop there, right? Because once the attacker was able to compromise not the first degree victim, but also the second degree victim, that opens up a whole other chain of events for third degree victims, and it's really, really hard to maintain, and it's currently not maintained. What companies are doing, they're looking at their integration with Drift. They're looking, this is first degree victims. They're looking what data they have there, if it's just company contact, if there's secrets going on, if it's customer case tickets, if it's um, only leads, then it really makes a difference on how they do the disclosure. But it's still on the first stage, on the first victim side, and it's going to be much larger than that.
Yeah, and the bits and bytes of this are fascinating. Like the technical, everything about this is confusing. But Salar, there's a lot of business folks that are looking for an answer and they're finding budget to try to find
Yeah.
any answer. You're working with our partners specifically who are spread throughout the world and they have feet on the ground, virtual feet on the ground, trying to resolve this. You know, it's been a hectic 3 weeks for you and our partner community. What are people doing to help our joint customers to identify if they've been breached and recover from this?
Yeah, I think everyone is kind of still in the dark, and they're trying to figure out if they've been impacted, how big the impact is. So our partners, what they've been doing is helping their clients get that visibility. Take a look at their integrations, see how that's looking, and if they have been impacted. And obviously, we've been helping our partners, giving them the tools they need, and using the grip solutions to kind of gain that visibility. But I think, Chad, it's still kind of new. It's impacted a lot of organizations. Obviously, you mentioned 700, but seems like it's going to be a lot larger than that. And talking to partners, talking to customers, that's a topic that comes up on a daily basis. A lot of their customers are concerned, but having that visibility is key for our partners, and that's what they're doing right now, and that's what we're hearing.
Yeah, in that growth, I was personally having a hard time wrap my head around how it impacted so many people. And then Aviv, you actually presented this slide on an internal meeting last week, and that's where my mind and Salar, I think yours as well, said, oh, I get it now. This is bad. Because what we're seeing here, and Aviv, I'm going to ask you to describe this, but this is linear growth. I'm sorry, not linear. Exponential growth. When that term is often misused, we're actually seeing this grow exponentially, and that's why Salesloft and Drift can now be secure. But we're seeing massive growth on the back end there. So can you talk through again how one little breach, seemingly little breach, has led to thousands and thousands likely of SaaS vendors being susceptible to attack?
Yeah, sure. And I do want to pinpoint what you just said about that. It's just one little breach, right? Drift is not a huge, a huge percentage of the chatbot marketplace or Salesforce connector marketplace. It's just one vendor. Um, this is not an isolated event. This can happen through a lot of different vendors, which we can talk about in the end. But essentially, there was a very single breach to Drift, as we talked about through GitHub. The threat actor was able to get access to Salesforce and Gmail OAuth tokens. This means that he had access to Drift clients' Salesforce instances, and in some cases with Drift email, also directly to the Gmail to their inbox, which is not talked about a lot, but it was confirmed by Mandiant and is an issue. Most of the companies or most of the news talk only about the Salesforce aspect, but there is also the Gmail aspect here. So once the attacker was able to gain access to the Salesforce objects and the Gmail, the attacker did credential harvesting to be able to extract keys and credentials to that client's applications. Okay, and that extends to the second degree of clients or impacted companies that through that Salesforce object were able to get, for example, AWS access or Snowflake or other different keys. Just an example of how this would look like into day-to-day. For example, there's a company and that company was breached by Drift, and that company, let's call them X, have a ticketing system which they send and communicate logs with customers through Drift. And in those logs, there's credentials. And when that goes over, the attacker sees that and is able to extend their reach into the second degree victims. And of course, once the attacker has access to such critical infrastructure like AWS, Snowflake, and many, many others, this cascading effect and this exponential growth only gets larger, because then for each company of a second degree breach, the amount of companies that they have as customers is also large.
Yeah, and I think the term that really got me the first time I saw you present this was credential harvesting. Like that's the moment that clicked for me, which was, oh my goodness, if they have access to all my data, they have access to keys, to credentials, and then they can just use it for anything. In Salar, I want you to talk about what's a realistic footprint for most of our customers, right? It's not that it's just 10 or 20 different environments that they're integrated with. They have people bringing in shadow SaaS all over the place. It's thousands, right?
It is. It's growing super fast, and I know we're going to talk about this in the next slide, but it's very similar to something we've seen in the past, and I think the impact is going to be significant.
Yeah. So let's move on to that next slide. As you said, this was a question I believe Idan, our CTO, asked this again in an internal meeting earlier this week. Is this our Log4j moment? And so just so everyone's on the same page, about 4 or 5 years ago, Log4j, which was a common logging library for Java systems, had a easy to identify and easy to breach attack, which led to massive risk through all web-facing systems. Because it was specifically within Java, that only impacted about 40% of the environment. So, Salar, I want to start with you on the business side. How interconnected are these SaaS systems? Like, do people realize that it's not 40%, this could be like 90, 95%?
It can be, yes. And that's the feedback we're getting, the conversations that seems like our partners are having with their customers is, yes, those systems are all connected and it can impact literally everything, right? So comparing it to Log4j, technically it's not the same exact breach, but it can be even more impactful if it can be as impactful and maybe more. And it hits a lot of different boxes. Trusted integrations, credentials being exposed, and then it's impacting a huge range of organizations as well. So yes, comparing it to Log4j, I think it makes a lot of sense, and it's going to be even bigger than that.
Yeah, and then Aviv, the way people are reacting is very similar to how they reacted for Log4j as well. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so worryingly similar. So when Log4j happened, companies immediately started to scan all of their systems to see if they have the affected Java versions. So they had the tools to do this, right? They can do it through the EDR. They could use their IT system, PowerShell, and all of that to extract for every host to see if there is a Log4j vulnerability. But they were in the dark at first. So until these scripts were out, until it was done, which it sometimes took weeks until they could get the coverage of the entire organization. They were in the dark. They didn't know if they were vulnerable. They didn't know if somebody already used the vulnerability against them, and there was like a cat and mouse game of who would find it first, the organization or the attacker. In our case, with the drift, it's a bit more worrying, and we do see the same reaction of being in the dark. Companies don't know if they're directly breached by drift. They don't know if they're a second-degree victim, a third-degree victim. They're up until now, which it's already been a few weeks. Companies are still asking their vendors, "Are you using Salesloft? In what way? What data is going?" So they don't have the tools like they did back in when Log4j was out to actually find out. They're more in the dark than they were back then.
Yeah, because back then Log4j seemed very immediate, very impactful, and there was a very quick response. Here we have a much, much longer tail. And you can even, if you just do a quick news search for Salesloft today, there were no major articles posted about Salesloft today. So it's almost like media has lost interest after 10 days or so. And we have a lot of work ahead of us as an industry. And so I promised this earlier because I think it is important to note this is not a standalone instance, right? This is one in a string of attacks where attackers are getting smarter, they're getting greedier, right? If we look back just a year ago when this really focused set of SaaS attacks started to happen, we saw Disney hit twice. Snowflake had a massive data breach where 160 customers were impacted. That exposed 500 million records, just an unfathomable amount. AT&T got hit and exposed 110 million customers. And that trend kind of continued through 2024 into early 2025, where we saw companies like TransUnion and Allianz get hit. Victoria's Secret famously got hit, pulled their website down. That impacted their stock price by 8%. So this is not about, hey, there's just a technical impact. There is a financial impact. And then with this attack, like you said, it was an attack on one relatively small app that has had this massive cascading impact that you just went through. And so, Salar, I want you to talk a little bit about the business reality here, because this is not about, hey, our protections failed, because a whole chain of protections just hasn't been adopted. And this is a really big wake-up moment in the industry. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're all seeing the growing awareness, right? To your point, attacks on SaaS applications are not rare headlines anymore. You're seeing it every day. It's an everyday risk. So this impact is pretty serious. A single account or a single integration gets hacked, and it can disrupt the whole business operations. Now, that's why we're now seeing new budgets being set aside for SaaS security. CISOs, leaders, they're searching for answers because the old security models, they don't fit, and they don't fit to help with this new problem. So, that's why we think, what's needed here is kind of twofold. It's immediate analysis and protection. So companies can see where they're vulnerable, where they're exposed, and they can act quickly. And then the second one is pretty much long-term improvement. So SaaS security has to become part of the foundation, and it's not supposed to be just an afterthought. And Chad, this is not optional anymore. It's the reality every organization is facing. We're hearing more about it, and that's why companies like us exist, to help with this.
Yeah, and if we want to get down to dollars and cents again, I mentioned the Victoria's Secret stock dip. There was another story that came out recently. I believe it was Qantas Airlines. Their executives are losing bonuses or partial bonuses because of cybersecurity instances. So, it's often been the issue that, hey, can we cut a little bit more from security? We haven't been breached, therefore, we spent 10 million on security, we didn't get breached. Can we do it with 8 million? That's starting to change a little bit because it's so directly tied to business operations and financial data. So Aviv, I want to toss it back to you because we can sit here all day and tell everyone all the negative stuff, but it's not really worth us having this discussion unless we start talking about what can be done. So I'd like you to focus on, these are kind of the 7 kind of core practices we're seeing across the industry. Can you hit on each of these a little bit? And by the way, if anyone wants more detail, go to our webpage, go to LinkedIn, hit us up. We're happy to walk through these in more detail. But Aviv, go through these real quick if you can.
Yeah, sure. So the first one is to review your OAuth integrations. You need to check all of the integrations you have and try to pinpoint if you have Drift-related connections. This is for both IDP. So for example, if you're a Google Workspace user and you're using Drift email, that is an integration that is compromised with a high likelihood, and that needs to be reviewed. And also in your Salesforce integrations, check for Drift connectivity there. And of course, check the usage. Is it being used? Do you have the right protections and in place to prevent abnormal access to it? And also investigate if there's any actual malicious behavior, right? So as we mentioned in the beginning of the webinar, the attacker didn't cover the tracks that well, but let's assume that they did. Let's try and find out everything we can to see if there's any indicator that that there was a compromise or breach. And the fourth one is to cross-check other connected systems, right? So if you have data that is going through Salesforce, and you know that with Drift, sometimes your customers are uploading tokens, or you're uploading tokens with Drift, that also needs to be checked to make sure that there's no second-degree expansion there. The fifth one here is to revoke and rotate OAuth tokens immediately. Google has done that, and also Salesforce has done that. But we do not know the full extent of this breach. So as a precaution, it's definitely recommend to just rotate or revoke any Drift-related tokens as a safe side, or if you have any indicator that another third party was impacted from it, or credentials that were harvested by the attacker could have been breached, then also revoke and rotate those credentials. For future cases, we of course need to continue and audit and restrict SaaS integrations, not just Drift related. This should be done systematically for OAuth integrations. If it's from your IDPs, from your SaaS applications, Slack, Salesforce, and so on. And also the ability to prevent these attacks from happening. These applications, such as Salesforce, have configurations that make compromise much harder. For example, if you would only limit the IP range of access from your integrations, then that means the attacker couldn't access your Salesforce instance if you're doing it from a VPN or Tor or from his home, and only from the official Drift IP address range. So these type of configurations are also very important to make sure they're all in place. And of course, enhance, make sure you have the ability to monitor any abnormal behavioral in your integrations, any user activity that is suspicious or abnormal, and make sure your coverage is wide. So of course we have monitoring and some monitoring for our IDP integrations, but over here these are SaaS integrations that are much wider. Some are not known. As I said, we're a lot in the dark on this. So make sure you're able to find them all, monitor to prevent any further breaches from happening.
Yeah, and that's a great summary. We could probably talk about that for 2 hours if we had the time, but we don't,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So, Salar, your phone's been ringing off the hook. You won't get off your text messages. Like, people are asking you, help us all day long for the last 2 weeks. Can you talk about the 4 main things where people are coming to us, whether they be partners or customers, and saying, hey, we need some help, and how we're offering up that help?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, our partners are on the ground every day. They're kind of helping their customers navigate this chaos and kind of helping with their concerns. So, we here at Grip, we're standing behind them, making sure they have all the tools they need. They have visibility, and they have the support they need to support their customers and help them with these challenges, right? So technically, not just reacting, we're helping our partners go out and build a stronger long-term SaaS security foundation, right, for their customers. And on these 4, I think Aviv covered a lot of it, but basically we can help map every SaaS application and OAuth connection, right? And that's the start. And then from there, obviously detecting the risky scopes, unused permissions, any abnormal tokens that are there, and then behavioral analytics. So any anomalies like suspicious OAuth grants, everything else. And lastly is taking action on those, right? So remediation, one-click remediation. These are all available for your customers. We've also built, for everyone who's kind of just trying to get a sense of this, that's what's going on. We've built a kind of a partner resource that makes it super easy for you guys and for your customers to understand the breach, and then kind of easier for you to have the conversation with your customers and bring clear value to your accounts and to your customers right away. But these are pretty much the easiest 4 steps that you can take with the customers.
Yeah, and the best part of this is that the weakness that we're encountering, SaaS being interconnected, is also kind of the best part of this. When I first joined the company, our CTO said, we can deploy in 10 minutes with 4 clicks. And I put him to the task. I think it was more like 7 minutes with 5 clicks, but close enough there, right? So the reality is, because these environments are so interconnected, you don't have to deploy heavy hardware. You don't have to go through a multi-month deployment. Like, we can take advantage of the same weaknesses to make sure your systems are more secure. So with that, I want to make sure everyone knows we can help. We are here to help. We have a team mobilized, ready to help however you need it. I appreciate everyone joining today. Aviv, thank you for joining. Salar, great insight. Appreciate you both. And we will all talk soon. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a great day.
Bye.